Welcome back to Newsgang. The hashtag is Newsgang at Citizen TV Kenya, and 22422. That is the last time we will address Sam as Gen Z, because, yeah, the evisceration that has happened around this bench has been epic. But let's talk about the police, because in the wake and in the aftermath of what we saw last week, there's been some great support for the police, and maybe, you know, taking a look at you know, the state of police affairs and police reforms in the country. But first, I'd like us to listen to President William Ruto 37, just speaking about, you know, the support that the government will provide enforcers of the law.
Government of Kenya and myself as president, I will make sure that in the discharge of your duties, every security officer is equally secured by the people of Kenya.
Indeed, but you know, we've been here before. Now, what exactly is ailing the police service, and why do we see these you know, this sort of conduct during you know, a protest, and indeed during several other interactions between the police and the people? Let's not mention Albert Ojwang. Let's not even speak of Boniface Kariuki. But it would seem like the touch point between the police and the people, there's still aspects of it that have not quite been resolved yet. And there have been several attempts at introducing police reforms and taking a look at the conditions under which they serve, be it pay, be it housing, be it the equipment, the training that they're provided. And we've tried this quite a few times. We've spent billions of shillings. And perhaps the very latest one was the task force that was led by former Chief Justice David Maraga on the same. And there were over 589 recommendations per my recollection from this report. Some of them required legislation, some of them not. They were just things that could be done. Jamil, I'll come to you in a moment. I'd like us to listen to the President receiving that interim report from former Chief Justice David Maraga.
2 entry points, one at the constable level and another one at the cadet level, so that we attract more professionals into the service and ensure that more people with requisite professional expertise can join the police.
What were those recommendations, Jam?
There were several, actually, and it's important to remember that the report that was submitted to the President identified critical legal, institutional, policy and welfare challenges facing the National Police Service, the Kenya Prison Service and the National Youth Service. So I'll just quickly go through them. Some of the key recommendations include institutional restructuring and governance. It recommended merging the Kenya Police and Administration Police under a unified framework. Another recommendation is decentralization of command, which recommended shifting authority from the Nairobi-based command to provincial and station levels. It wanted the command to be granted operational and financial autonomy to local commanders, enhance transparency and accountability. There's a recommendation on oversight and accountability also. It included reinforcing IPOA to investigate misconduct with subpoena powers and witness protection. There was something about ethics, corruption, and conduct, where they were recommending the introduction of a binding code of ethics which prohibited conflict of interest activities, for example, owning a public transport business as a policeman, tightening controls over roadblocks, promotions, and procurement to limit corruption. There's an important one about welfare and service conditions, and it recommended a 40% salary increase for junior officers over 3 years, and also recommended harmonizing pay across services and provide insurance and decent housing. There was something about training and suitability review. There was a recommendation about operational capacity and crime investigations. They wanted renaming and restructure of the DCI for autonomy to include forensic science departments. There was something about reforming police culture. There was a recommendation about implementation of structures and oversight and resource and legislative strategy. But Yvonne, it's important to note that in April this year, the High Court ruled that the presidential formation of the task force was unconstitutional, stating that the National Police Service Commission legally holds those mandates. The ruling said that even the constitution of that body, so anything that was recommended was unconstitutional. But the Interior Ministry said that, and I quote this from the PS, that 255 of the 271 recommendations remained active, with 50% already underway. But there were obstacles, which included funding delays and bureaucratic hurdles. But when you listen to those recommendations, Yvonne, they actually make sense. Welfare, yeah? Having training and suitability, looking at ethics, corruption and conduct, oversight and accountability, decentralizing of command. Really beautiful terms, really beautiful recommendations that kama mwana imepigwa break kidogo. But I don't know, Bonyo, utakuongezea hapo.
I think it is important that you mentioned that the courts put a break to some of these recommendations, but at least some of them had already been implemented. And the reforms in the police sector, I think every subsequent administration has made an attempt at it. So one question that we might want to ask is, every administration comes in and they have this solution to reforming the police sector. But as soon as they leave office, or even in the course of their practice, the bad habits and manners within the police service still exists. So you want to ask, where is the problem? Three things from me. One, I'd say that it all boils down to the curriculum. In teaching, and some would know this, there's something we call hidden curriculum, where we might have a very good syllabus, but the people instructing it are not as good as the syllabus. That the people training you have some mannerism or way in which they train you that still reeks of the old order. That you are trained, and in the training, you are subjected to insults, you are subjected to very rudimentary practices and all that. Even if you had the best curriculum in the world, once you are done with it, then what your takeout is the manner in which you are being trained, not what you are being trained in. So for me, that would be the first instances where police reforms really needs to look at. Because why do you train? Basic HR manuals will tell you that you train for current and future manpower needs. What we see today, as we release our police officers to service, it's still on the current, not on the future. And if there is an element of the future, then they're not executing it as trained. And that brings you back to the hidden curriculum. The other one is the subculture in the police sector. Growing up, some of us were being told that the easiest avenue to make money was to become a police officer. And there was this running joke because in my hometown, there was a police station across, and you'd be told that a police officer...
It was banned today?
Pardon? No.
Is that the one?
Just asking.
Yes.
No, that's okay.
Yes, that you could easily task that whoever remains at home puts in water on fire, you run to the road, and you come back with unga and a kilo of meat, and silently telling you, if you wanted the money, you can easily get it. Yeah. So it tells you there are certain subcultures within the police service that have not been erased, have not been done. So you come into the service because they're fantastic police officers that really want to serve the nation and protect life and property. But you come in a sea where everybody else tells you, hizo zote unataka kufanya ni ya kitabu, hapa ukifika, hivi ndio tunafanya. Then that subculture really needs to be looked at. The last thing is about behavior. And behavior is something largely you acquire by monitoring. So you go for protests, and then you come back and unauliza ulituanga wangapi rungu na hakuna because you are that diligent officer serving. Then it becomes like a badge of honor. That if you do certain things, then it's treated with a lot of respect within the service. Then you drop all that which is good that you intended to do, and you pick this one because probably that is what will earn you ranks. So for me, police reforms in this country must go back to the basics. It doesn't matter how well you pay the police officers. It doesn't matter what caliber on infrastructure you put for them. But if you don't train them to serve with that dignity, with that integrity and everything, and to use modern methods to deal with this generation that is, they say, the only thing they fear is death itself, nothing else. So in your training, you must, are these people that I'd want to treat or engage with a protest management template of 1998, when most of them had not been born. So there are certain things that we really must look at. Before we look at the big picture of all these reforms, let's go back to the basics and ask the curriculum, the culture, and the behavior.
And you know, the best way to judge the outcome of whether any of these reforms works continues to be in the touch point, finally, with the citizens.
Yes.
We still don't see changes there. We still see a culture of fear, you know, on the part of the citizens when encountering a police officer. If you've had the favor and the opportunity to travel, you will find that in various countries, when you're lost and when you're scared, you will ask the police, and they will provide some sort of help or direction. I wonder if we can say the same for here, and what that interaction and how it ends up, and you know what the ultimate outcome of that is, and we can take a look at the extremes of you know what we've seen on the streets and in the police cells, but I think it's in everyday life, and everything you're saying, Jay, are things that we have heard in not one, not two, not three attempts to do this, and then we hear the one thing that Jamila has said consistently: funding and bureaucracy. So therefore, are these you know administrations serious about it, or is it all cosmetic? Because all these billions of shillings, why would we not fund this if this is something that every administration comes on and says, yes, we're going to institute police reforms, and then it doesn't happen, and then the subsequent one then does that, allocates and commits billions of shillings to pretty much the same thing, just sort of said in different languages, then, you know, what are we doing? And throwing money perhaps isn't the problem? Isn't the solution?
You will recall that as soon as President William Ruto came to the office, he said that the police will be independent financially, so forwarded the budget to the National Police Service with their own accounting officer, and I think there was some controversy there because there was a PAS, Principal Administrative Secretary, who was appointed for the National Police Service, and it was raising an issue, can you have a presidential appointee managing affairs of the National Police Service? But there was that willingness or attempt to really allow the police to be independent. But then again, I think if you're to reflect on the two issues that Yvonne and Jay are saying, you then must ask yourself, how do you end up with a policeman? So this is a young man or a young woman who has just come from school. They have scored the minimum of D+ for recruitment. They appear at the recruitment centers. Of course, after making an application, you appear, you are selected. If you're lucky, you're taken to the institution where you're supposed to be learning whatever skills you need to be taught about. But if you're to look at the statement or the report of the Maraga Task Force, which never mind, later on the High Court found it to be unconstitutional because of how it was constituted, but it gave us a report that you can really use to understand what goes on in there. So you find that the Maraga report was finding that there were challenges when it came to recruitment of officers, because they were finding that there's a lot of influence peddling when it comes to recruitment, that you find there are even questions of bribes up to the extent of some 600,000 shillings for you to be recruited into the police service. So you can imagine if you have to raise such an amount, you get into the service, how then do you recover that spend? So then you're talking about the question of the training, because the Maraga Task Force was finding that the training facilities are inadequate. So there are no adequate physical and operational infrastructural facilities at training colleges, at the police stations levels, and obviously listening and speaking to people that have been at the police training colleges, they will tell you that one of the big challenges they have is that you have a big class of, say, 800 plus recruits. They have to be taught in one hall. How do you deliver content to a class of 800? How do you pay attention? And never mind, what is it, Linus? Never mind how the recruitment has been done. So the recruitment is wrong in the first place because money has traveled a distance. There are those questions that are being raised about politicians being involved. So there are allocations. There are certain number of positions that are allocated to the politicians. So you come in and you say, I came here through my uncle who knows someone who knows someone who knows a politician. Then you are taken to a class of 800. You're supposed to pay attention. There are challenges with the facilities, the infrastructure there. If you're being taught on how to aim and shoot, then you're sharing a firearm as so many people. When you speak to trainers and people that have come out of those colleges, they'll tell you they don't have much of experience in handling firearms. Even when you find some of these police officers are deployed in the field, how do they handle firearms? You've heard of officers who have sometimes shot at each other or perhaps by accident shot at themselves. So it tells you something about it. Now, the other question that Maraga Task Force was able to find out is about the corruption in the service. They're talking about rampant corruption, cronyism, nepotism, favoritism, tribalism, and of course, like what I said about the slots being sold, they highlighted one of the key departments, the traffic department, as one that was facing a lot of challenges, saying again that the task force, which held sittings in all the 47 counties and listened to the people, they were saying that the toll stations are actually just stations for looting and also collecting bribes. Now, when you reflect on all those things, then you come to the question of, they were talking about how do you recruit leadership in the police service? Sometimes it's not competitive. How do you recruit an inspector general, for instance? An inspector general is an appointee of the president. It's not the result of a competitive process. What happens is that the president picks someone, taken to the National Assembly for vetting and approval, and then an appointment is made. What if it were to be a competitive? And I think it was competitive earlier until an amendment was passed a few years ago. Then the other question is on that particular question of how do you recruit. Maraga Task Force was recommending that the minimum grade for recruitment should actually be made to be a C-, not a D+. Only that for areas that you need affirmative action, you can maintain it at D+. The areas that you might consider to be marginalized. But obviously, we've not heard of this happening. The other recommendation that the Maraga Task Force made was that there should be an independent vetting of senior police officers from the rank of senior superintendent of police. Vet them, check suitability, check how they have generated their wealth. Are they suitable to serve in the service? This has not happened. If it were to happen, I don't know what the outcome would be.
But you remember, you remind me of, vetting exercises in the past, where it just became almost a circus and people were being asked about, their M-Pesa balances and that sort of thing. We tend to be so academic in this country. I mean, everything all of you are reading out in terms of the recommendations and this is what to do, all sound really good on paper. It's nice and shiny and it's, written in ink and where's the gap between all of these great things that we say and we spend millions, if not billions of shillings on, to everything? Why are we so good at, figuring out the problem, articulating it, but then now finding the solution is where we completely
lose. Where we draw the line.
Yeah.
The name of the problem you're looking for is called political goodwill. And I want to say it's not possible to reform the police as an island. The police are part of our society. So you cannot make them more better than its society is. And when I speak of political goodwill, I do that because for the many efforts that have been made to reform the police, the one roadblock that has always existed is that of lack of political goodwill to do it. In 2008, after the post-election violence, we had foreigners coming here to set us back to our statehood because we were nearly collapsing after the violent post-election violence. And a very respected judge, Justice Waki, was in charge of the Commission of Inquiry into the Post-Election Violence, CPEV, and he was actually the first one to come with a raft of reforms. When you look at what Waki recommended, and then what later retired Chief Justice Maraga recommended, they are very similar. Yeah. They are very similar. The only two achievements that can be pointed out that have been at least accomplished. One is the establishment of the Independent Oversight Commission, IPOA. IPOA is a product of the Waki Commission report. And also, a raft of reforms, nice language going into the National Police Service Act of 2011. So those are the two products that really went there, and then it stops. Why does it stop? Because of the political culture of this country. Is the police service really independent? Is it free? Is the Inspector General of Police free to make the decisions that he is supposed to make? Not long ago, we saw the Inspector General of Police popping out of a car roof, was it? To also speak in a political rally. Yeah. I want to submit that he spoke there as a hostage, not as a free man. A hostage of circumstances, that you are facing a lot of political pressure. That now you are in your village, you had better stand up and demonstrate that we gave you the job. That is the political problem that we are talking about. There are a lot of fine people in the police service who actually understand policing, who understand the place of rule of law and order, but who face very, very serious political obstacles. Look at, for example, management of public order. How free are the police to exercise their duties, their mandate? When goons are brought in and they are politically connected, how do you as a police officer deal with that? You'll be told, relax, work with those ones. We remember the protests of 2024 last year. It's a fact, whether from our reporters or ourselves directly. You'll hear from a diligent police officer who tells you another group has come in with motorbikes. Yeah. And they are politically connected. This is a team deployed by the political side. These are the things that can't make reforms possible. So the police service is not an island. You cannot reform it without reforming our political culture first. I want to talk about political bias as well, which is a huge problem when it comes to how police are deployed to politics. Last week, you remember, was it last week, that retired Chief Justice Maraga took part in a protest. How did we react? We withdrew his police officers.
With reforms.
Yeah.
Yes. We're going for training, no?
So we use policemen as political tools. Yeah. They're not even officers. You move them depending on your political feelings of the time. I mean, even media experiences that. You know, there was a time in the previous administration, because of the story you are running, the administration policemen at the gate will disappear. Yeah. This is childish. It's really the attitude that can't allow the police to be free. So, before we demand reforms of the police, let's reform the culture around, the environment around which they operate. They can't be the saints in the middle of hell.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good place to leave it. I think it sums up what Joseph was saying, you know, the culture, the behavioral, but perhaps that should be what we look at on this other end.
Sure.
Before we even start saying change the culture and the behavior of the police themselves. So take a good hard look at where we are. So we leave it there for now. Jamila, do you want to
take us there?
Yes. Do the thing that.
You know, I can't remember the last time nilianza. Leo nimeamua.
But first you have to finish.
Finish.
Hiyo ndio kazi tunakulipa.
Sawa, tumemaliza, tunataka kufanya final word na tulia I'm starting.
Okay.
Jaribu kukata.
No, those are good reforms. Good reforms indeed.
This is the sort of culture and behavior we speak
Exactly.
that needs to change.
Yeah, even by studio etiquette. Handing over to yourself, I don't know how.
Abuse of power.
There we go. All right. Ready. Let's